So we're continuing this sermon series called Exodus, a Christmas Story. And I know you're what you're thinking. You're like, Exodus, a Christmas story? There's no woman who's pregnant on a donkey in the Christmas story. There's nowhere in the Christmas story that they go from end to end looking for where there's room. That's not even in there in the Exodus story, right? Yeah, I know. But there is a story about a guy who's scared, and God comes to him and says, hey, I want you to do this. There is in the Exodus and Christmas story, there is two tyrants that think that they have all power over what's going on. And both stories have lots of firstborn babies losing their life. And both stories have God's people coming out of Egypt and through water. It's very cool. And what's going on here, this is actually Matthew's Christmas story. What's going on here is that Matthew is ringing a bell. He knows who his audience is. It's first century Hebrews, right? He knows who his audience is, and he's ringing a bell, and he's going, remember the last time God saved his people? Hey, remember that? Remember the Exodus when God saved them from Egypt? It's happening again. But this time it's bigger and better. So that's what's happening. That's why we're doing Exodus, a Christmas story. It is Matthew's Christmas story. And I'm trying to help you see it in the same light, in the fullness that they would have seen it back then. So in order to talk about today, we have to start where all amazing sermons start. And that's talking about James Bond movies, right? So we need to come to an agreement right here at the top. Who is the best Bond? Sean? No. The correct answer is Daniel Craig. He's in the front. There are no pictures of Sean Connery in the front. At least not that you can prove right now. Yeah, boo. Sean Connery, huh? Sean Connery. He's number 2 there. He's number 2. But the correct answer is Daniel Craig. It's okay. But Bond has this one thing that's always in common with all the movies, right? And even the Austin Powers movies make fun of this. There's always this time when Bond is just stuck. It looks like the evil villain has won. He's in this impossible situation, and he's able to kind of break free eventually, but it looks like evil has won. I was actually trying to find video clips of this, and I found this ridiculous Sean Connery one, where he's like in a spa because he's James Bond, you know? He's in a spa, and they put him in this like traction device. I don't even know what movie this was from, but then a gloved hand comes in and like pushes open for the full traction, and it's like going to break his back. And it's the most ridiculous scene you've ever seen, but a gloved hand comes and does it. I don't know, it's kind of funny. But Bond, there's always a struggle. It looks like evil is about to win, right? Casino Royale is one of the best Bond movies, right? Yeah, it is. Daniel Craig, right? But there's the original. but there's that one scene where he's down in the lair and he's naked sitting in the chair. And like all Bond movies, they try to get you to that point. It's like, I don't really know how he's going to get out of this. That feeling right there is how the story in Matthew wants you to feel. It wants you to feel like, ooh, Bond is not in charge right now. Someone else is in charge. And in the Exodus story, the person that's in charge is this bad-looking dude right here, right? If you saw this guy walking around the streets, I'm pretty confident you wouldn't mess with him, right? Just because he's just walking around shirtless with some hat thing on, it's ridiculous. But you got Yul Brynner there, and you don't mess with Pharaoh because Pharaoh is a god amongst people. And God comes to Moses and is like, you need to go to Pharaoh and go, let my people go, right? And he's scared to do this because Pharaoh is in charge. Pharaoh is all the way in charge, and they've had the Hebrews enslaved for hundreds of years now. And it looks like God has almost abandoned them. And it looks like Pharaoh is in charge. It looks like God can't be king in this situation. In fact, it looks like Pharaoh is completely in charge, enslaving and whipping God's people. The same thing is happening in Matthew. The same idea, or this huge, where Matthew is, he's bringing in this similar thing. So, you know how we usually think of the Christmas story? It's like there's all this time that is spent in Bethlehem with them like waiting for Jesus to be born, and they're going from end to end. Matthew doesn't deal with any of that. Here's all of Matthew's phrase here. He goes, "Now after Jesus was born in Bethlehem of Judea in the days of Herod the king." That's it. That's it right there. That's all it talks about, like the whole journey to Bethlehem, everything. But there's something key going on here. It says, in the days of Herod the king. I think a lot of times we read that and we're like, okay, that's a time marker. There's Herod. But we need to put your biblical glasses on so you understand who this Herod is and why it's such a big deal here. Because Herod is in charge. This guy is in charge. And I have some examples as to why. And I'm not sure if I've shared these with you before, but these are some of my favorite things to talk about with Herod. So Herod's brother-in-law, he was younger, but he was super popular with the people. And he ended up having, it's recorded, that he ended up having a drowning accident in a pool that's known to be very shallow. I wonder how that happened, right? Herod's wife was a princess, and she was in the royal line, and Herod accused her of adultery and had her strangled. But don't worry about it. He had built a tower to her in her honor. Seems like a fair move, right? Seems like a guy that's all good here. He also had 3 sons. He had 3 sons, and he was worried that they were going to do something to take over the throne from him. So he killed all 3 of them in different ways. He wanted yeah, right? Nice guy. This guy is in charge. And I think this one takes the cake. He goes, he wanted honor so much on his deathbed that when he was on his deathbed and about to die, he had all the favorite nobles from the area kidnapped and brought to his castle. And he had under strict orders that when he died, they were to be put to death because there would be mourning in the streets when Herod died. This guy's in charge, right? This guy's in charge. So when you read this, now after Jesus was born in Bethlehem of Judea in the days of Herod the king, that should say something different to you now. This is not just some time marker, but it's an emotional marker that comes into you. That's like, oh, that's not good. Because what happens right after this? We just read it. The Magi from the east come, and they come riding in on their camels and over there, and they come right into Jerusalem, right into the king's courts. And what do they say? We're here to see the new king. And it was probably just as quiet in his courts then too. Someone's like, you said that? Don't say that. People die when they say that, right? Like that's so good. We're here to see the new king and bow down to him and give him all these great kings. And Herod's like, oh, you say there's a new king. There's a new king that's here, right? Tell me about this king. When did you see this star? When did you see all of this? It looks like Herod is in complete control, that he is in charge of the situation. And he ends up kind of tricking the wise men. And he says, hey, so go pay your respects to this new king, and then come back and tell me so that I may go there too. But we all know what's up, right? We all know what's going on with Herod. What's he going to do? He's going to kill him. He's going to kill him. And so they go, and they end up going back over to Bethlehem, and behold, the star happens again. But we're going to get to that in a second. So, how's your life here? What are those things in you that look like, oh, this is what's in charge? Yeah, this stuff over here is what is actually in charge of my life. Maybe it's your health situation, and you just don't know how you're going to get through it all anymore. Like maybe it's your boss or your work or whatever. There's things in our life that we just don't know how we're going to get through. What's in charge of you? What is king in your life that is dictating to you what's going on? Right? Sometimes it looks like Herod is in charge or Pharaoh is in charge. And sometimes it looks like our jobs are in charge of us or our health or something like that is in charge. But there's good news here. Because when we continue reading Matthew, we get down to verse 9. And it says, after the Magi, after they were listening to the king, they went on their way. And behold, the star that they had seen when it rose went before them until it came to rest over the place where the child was. Now here's what's interesting. When you look at Hebrew scholars, that star that they had seen rose and went before them, they connect that to, there's actually an angel that leads the people of Israel out of Egypt towards the sea. And the Hebrew scholars think that this is the same idea. That's that same angel that was leading them over there. But what I love about this phrase is after listening to the king, they went on their way and behold. Suddenly there's a change. Suddenly something changes and shows you that those things that you thought were in charge weren't actually in charge. They are not the true king. The true king is starting to act. God is in charge, and God starts to act. That his star begins to lead them once again and takes them to Bethlehem, and they give their gifts of gold, myrrh, and frankincense to this new king that's probably a small boy at the time. They give their gifts to this king, and then they have a dream of God, and behold, they have a dream, right? And God tells them, go back a different way. And they go back another way. And the same thing happens in the Exodus story. The same thing happens, that and behold, God begins to work. Right at the beginning of our Exodus reading, it says that Moses seemed like a god to Pharaoh. Moses seemed like a god to Pharaoh. Now, what you got to understand is that Pharaoh was this huge, powerful guy. He was in charge. He's walking around shirtless constantly. Like, that guy's in control, right? He's in charge, and he is a god amongst men. And that's why I think it's so interesting that this phrase says, God says, see, Moses, I've made you like a god to Pharaoh. In the original language in Hebrew, what that actually meant was that he said, see, Moses, you are God to Pharaoh. And what's interesting is how the book is bringing this up and bringing this forward, how the story is being written, is that this isn't a battle between men. This is not a battle that's just between Moses, this dude, and Pharaoh, this other dude, but it's a battle of gods. And the God of Egypt, because Pharaoh, he's so big and he's so in charge that he would never let God's people go. To the point said that his heart has been hardened. He's never going to let anyone take what is his. But behold, God begins to work. And there's 10 plagues. Blood, gnats, flies, frogs, all these things. And it culminates with the darkness and the death of a bunch of firstborns. But we'll get into that next week. But behold, God begins to work. It looks like it was the end of everything, that no one could win anything, but God begins to work. And I think our lives look like that too. But this Jesus, God works through his life through the entire way forward. And he keeps going on in his life, and Rome builds more power, and the religious leaders of the day build up their power, and they try to overcome and squelch God coming to earth, Jesus. Just like they try to squelch us and go, just be part of us, be part of our power, be part of what we have going on here. They try to control Jesus. And it looks like they won. It's like the end of all those Bond movies. But he rises again, showing the true power of this all. Showing the true power of what they are, because that resurrection is like an and behold. That you had all the powers of the world, that they put Jesus to death, but and behold, suddenly some women see him alive. It wasn't the powerful, it wasn't the elite of the world. It was women telling the truth about what they had seen, that he was alive. And he does all that for us. So when your life seems like it's completely fallen apart, if you messed up in some way and your finances are in shambles now, or your health's a mess, or your relationships are on the rocks, and you don't know how to go forward, understand that Christ still died and rose again for you. That all those things aren't king in your life, and they're not in control. The true king is. And we can rest in that fact. Because that's how all the Bond movies end, right? He ends up always getting out by some convoluted method, right? With sharks with laser beams on their heads, right? But Jesus brings you through it. And you can rest and not have fear, because God is in control and he brings you to him. And I think that's a hope that's worth having. And that's all I have for you today. God is in charge. Let us pray. Jesus, we thank you that you love us so much.